What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Facade. I am your host, Gavin J. Gallagher, and on this podcast, I explore the mental and emotional game often playing out subconsciously both in your mind and the mind of everyone else in the real estate or property investment market. The key to success in this game is to master your mindset and behavior, to take control of your thoughts, your emotions, and most importantly, your ego. Welcome to the show. Guys, real quick, if you're serious about scaling your property investments, then you need to check out my Elite Property Accelerator. Whether you are stuck on raising capital or structuring deals, or indeed just finding the right opportunity, this is the blueprint you need to take your portfolio and your finances to the next level. No fluff, just real world strategies that work. So guys, hit the link below. It says learn more, and I shall see you inside. All right, guys, what's up? Welcome back to another episode. And this week, I'm going to tell you a bit of a story, and it's going to explain why you didn't see me last week. Now, last week, I had outlined, in fact, let's go back 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, I had outlined the new format that I was bringing out, and it was going to include 2 episodes a week. One of them was going to be the episode that was my insights and thoughts and stuff, and then the other was going to be the guest interviews. I've got a big batch of them saved up at this point. And a couple of you even reached out to me and said that you were excited to hear that this 2-episode format was coming out, and the following week, nada, absolutely nothing, radio silence. And so I thought to myself, my God, what a crappy start to get started on this new format. And so I thought I better begin this week with the excuse. Why did I miss it? How did it unfold the way it did? And so this takes us back to, if you go back to the 1st of February, which was Saturday, as I'm reading my notes here, I'm thinking to myself, that is now 2 weeks ago. Yesterday, 1 week ago. And I was hosting my in-person members event that I put on every couple of months for the Accelerator members. And we had this guest speaker in attendance, Margaret Barrett from Mortgage Navigators. And she gave an excellent talk on the mortgage market. And she gave a big, long Q&A session afterwards. And the members were peppering her with questions, how to go about getting the mortgage and bridging finance and lots of stuff. And then it was time for lunch. So I took the gang down and we went down to the restaurant. And it was when we were in the restaurant that we were, sitting down, having a bite to eat. I noticed that I had a missed call from my sister. And so I went outside, gave her a quick call back, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Gavin, have you heard from Mum?" Now, my mum was away on holiday, and so the fact that she hadn't been heard from was a little bit of concern. She's down there in Spain all on her own, and she's not picking up her phone. And so a bit of a concern, especially given her age now. My mum is in her late 70s. But who knows? Like, it's one of those things. Maybe it's something innocent, like, the phone wasn't charged and it's just sitting there ringing out, or maybe she forgot it, or something simple like that. So I went back to the restaurant, sat down with the people, and we had 24 people at this event. And so I ended up booking the biggest conference room that they have in the hotel. And so the whole event is really starting to grow, and it's exciting actually to watch it grow like this. So I brought people back up to the room, and we started the afternoon session. And a few minutes into it, I see a call from a +34 phone number. Now, those of you who know Spain will know that that is a Spanish number. And so I answered it, but it had already gone and hung up. And so I called back this number, and it starts ringing out, like no answer at all. So I go back into the room, start talking to the guys again, when the call comes in again. And I was like, sorry guys, I've got to go and take this. So I went out of the room again, and this person is speaking to me in Spanish. Now, I do speak Spanish, but I'm not so fluent at it any longer, having lived back in Ireland for so long. that all I could do was just kind of make out parts of it. And it was something about my mom being in hospital. And so now, thankfully, they managed, I sort of said, habla inglés. And so the girl sort of had a bit of English, and she said, look, your mom has been taken to hospital. She's okay, but she is on medication now, so she's unable to talk. And that was it. And I got that call at around 3 p.m. on Saturday. So I go back into the room, I update the guys, and we go on with the rest of the talk. But my mind was distracted. It's hard to function when that kind of thing is going on and you're trying to run a room and stuff. But the guys were great. There was a lot of networking going on. And it's actually really cool to see the community that you've created just working away without you being part of it. Like I was outside of the room for a few minutes, and the noise from out in the corridor from the room, all of the guys just all chatting with each other, and it's a really like loud kind of din from everyone and all the conversations going on. So anyway, I rang my sister and I told her, look, the hospital made contact, they said everything's okay, and then I texted my brother just to kind of keep him in the loop. So no further information that night, and the next day still nothing at all. And that was the bit that started to kind of get us all worrying again. It's kind of like, well, it's one thing being told by the nurse that she's okay, but it's another thing, 12 hours later, you haven't heard anything still. And so there was a bit of back and forth between my brother and sister and I. And as I saw it, like my brother was getting very worried, but my sister was not so worried. She's been used to bringing mom back and forth to the doctors and stuff, and so she was a little bit more kind of nonchalant about it. But how long do you wait without hearing a single bit of information before you start worrying? So my sister started calling the hospital. No answer, could not get through. And that is what we call being in an information vacuum. And it's a really, really unsettling thing. The last thing I heard was that she was okay, which was reassuring. But why had she not reached out since then? Why 12 or 15 hours later do we still have no information, no update? We can't get through to the hospital. You can imagine it's pretty concerning. Like, why is the hospital not picking up? Why is my mom not picking up? Why? So my brother messages that he is about to jump on a flight to Spain. In fact, that he's looking at the different flights and things like that. But my sister was like saying, listen, let's not overreact here. The last message was that she was okay. But it's amazing how different people interpret information and situations in a different way. Here is the exact same information being received by both my sister and my brother and myself. And yet my sister is calm, my brother is panicking, he's buying a flight. And I'm there sort of midway between the two saying, guys, let's kind of think about the next step here before we overreact or underreact. Now, I used to live in Spain, as most of you will know who listen to the podcast. And so I took out my phone and I started going through my contacts and I started looking at the map. I found where the hospital was located, and it was not far from where I used to live. And so I figured out who I knew in my phone book that was likely to be able to jump in the car and go straight to the hospital. And it's a lady that I used to own a fashion boutique with down in Spain. I actually started it. Those of you who followed my story, you might have heard this before, but I actually started a fashion brand way back in 2008, I think it was, or 2009. And yep, it's still going. The fashion brand is still going. I ended up selling my shares to this lady who took it and ran with it herself. I didn't want to kind of be involved in a Spanish fashion business whilst I'm, doing property and related stuff. But anyway, I messaged her about the situation, about the lack of information, about what had happened. But I didn't hear back from her immediately. And in the meanwhile, my brother, he messages me and he's like, I booked the flight. I'm on the 7 a.m. flight tomorrow. I've hired a car, all of this stuff. He's really kind of taking action. And an hour later, I get a message from this lady, a friend of mine, and she said she left a voicemail, and she's just on WhatsApp saying, I'm in the car, I'm driving to the hospital, it's about 20 minutes away, I'll message you as soon as I get there. So I'm with my family, my kids, and we were sitting down in a place to get something to eat, and I get a message, and it's a video call, and it's a WhatsApp video call, and I turn on the call to kind of hear from this lady, and there's my mom on the phone, sort of all embarrassed, looking at me like, why have you got this lady to kind of drive down and come into the hospital? What's all the fuss about? So my mom, like unaware of the panic that is going on back home, like oblivious to this kind of the fact that my brother's booking a flight and all this kind of stuff. But it turns out what had happened was when it had actually been quite serious. The paramedics had been called, and they brought her in an ambulance to A&E, and she was brought in quite a lot of discomfort and pain. But after several hours on antibiotics and treatment and stuff like that, seemed perfectly fine. And so the reason we couldn't get through to her is that she had left her mobile in the apartment. When the medics took her, they didn't take her mobile. And because the hospital reception is the only place you can make a call, and the reception is closed on the weekends, there was the reason why there was no information and no pickup and everything like that. So, disaster averted. And while it was a little bit serious in the moment, with a bit of medical attention, everything was back under control. And so, a happy ending to the story. But it got me thinking about the relevance of information, the importance of information. And so I thought, let's quickly dive into the importance of information. Hey guys, if you're listening to this and thinking, I'd love to invest in property, but I don't even know where to start, well, I've got you covered. I am launching the Property Starter Pack on the 1st of March. It's designed specifically for beginners. There's no jargon. There is no overwhelm. It's just a step-by-step plan to buying your first property, whether that's your home or an investment property. You want to do that with confidence. And here's the kicker. The first 100 people to pre-register are going to get an exclusive early bird discount. And so I've put a link below to register your interest. And so find that in the show notes below and secure your spot. Now, back on with the episode. All right, let's talk about the importance of information. And more importantly, how do you avoid the mental vacuum and the fear loops? Now, this is actually part of a series that I am creating, and I'm calling it The Unshakable Investor. And you will find this entire series over on my YouTube channel, Gavin J. Gallagher. I'm going to put a link in the show notes. But the idea that I have here is that over the next couple of weeks, on a weekly basis, I'm going to add another nugget of information about becoming an unshakable investor and how important it is. Now, I've been telling the story about my mom getting sick in Spain. I noticed the different ways in which my brother and sister reacted to the lack of information. And so I started thinking about how can this relate back to investment theory and business and entrepreneurship. And it's often referred to as the information vacuum effect. And that is when your mind steps in to fill in the blanks. And this is problematic in life, but it's especially problematic as an investor. When we don't have enough information, the brain can jump to the worst case scenario. And it is in fact a survival instinct. Our mind assumes danger when any kind of clarity is missing. Now, there are plenty of examples you can immediately relate to. I'm sure those of you might be waiting on a call. If you've ever had a situation where there's an important phone call, whether it's a business meeting or some sort of a thing that you're waiting on, and while you're waiting there for that call to happen and it hasn't happened and you're waiting, it makes you feel terrible. And without anything negative having been said, your brain starts thinking and catastrophizing is how we say it. And what's happening is you've not received any information, but your brain is now jumping to a negative outcome. Is why is the delay happening? Is the deal off? Have the sellers changed their mind? Have the purchasers changed their mind? And this is your mind defaulting to fear. And good negotiators know that this happens, and they often use this to their advantage. So instead of calling you back and saying, yeah, we'll buy the property, here it is, they might just delay it, and they might delay it for a few hours or a day or two, and you might be there kind of thinking, what's happening? Are they going to renege on the deal? Are they going to chop the price or whatever? And you might end up going back offering a lower price just to kind of like get them back on track. The second thing to think about is what's known as the fog of war. And this is when a lack of information can cause very bad decisions to be made. Now, it's the fog of war. Obviously, it's a military strategist term, and they use the fog of war to describe the chaos and the uncertainty in war when clear intel is missing. If they don't have information from the battlefield, all sorts of mistakes can be made and really bad decisions. And I've heard of these situations where you end up like dropping bombs on your own men and stuff like that because you didn't have any information. You assumed that they couldn't have gotten that far. We better go and blast and all of this kind of stuff. Well, the same thing happens in business and in investing. Mistakes happen when people make decisions based on assumptions rather than real, actual data. And a good example of this is when an investor panics in any kind of a crash or a blip in the market. You react to the fall. You see the market falling and you're kind of thinking, oh my God, I got to sell. And you trigger this panic mode. But anyone who is, a seasoned investor can control that fear and can control those emotions. And they will know that, if you look at the historical context, the market always recovers, and it usually recovers quick enough and it bounces back. And so if you just sit there and wait it out, you will do absolutely fine. But the person who panic sells, that's the person who ultimately pays the price. Now, the third one is called the echo chamber effect. This is when too much of the wrong information is actually worse than having no information. Now, we talked about the information vacuum, and that is when the mind fills in the blanks. But what if instead of blanks, you are actually receiving misleading or biased information? And that is where market rumors can cause massive damage and lead people to acting irrationally. And a lot of the time, market rumors, they might actually be bad actors putting out negative rumors in order to kind of create an advantage for themselves. And I've heard of things, there's investors that are known for coming out and saying, oh, I'm going to sell my entire portfolio because I believe such and such is going to happen. And in reality, they've actually shorted the market and they're expecting a sell-off, and they'll actually do really, really well. Now, the echo chamber, social media is the perfect example of an echo chamber. The algorithm feeds you more of the viewpoint that you want to hear, and it'll usually keep away anything that you're not likely to click. It keeps away from you. And the reason it does that is because it's only interested in your engagement. But the reality is you're only hearing more of what you want to hear. You're not actually hearing an alternative view or a different viewpoint. And because of that, it's important to recognize when you're in that echo chamber. This is where you might just ask yourself, like, what newspaper do you read? If you read the same newspaper every single day, well, then the likelihood is you're receiving a similar type of information every single day. And I bet you never look at the other newspaper that might take an alternative view. And you could be, whether that's left-leaning or right-leaning, it doesn't really matter. The point is you have to recognize that you have a preference and you're in an echo chamber that is reflecting that preference. And so you'll see in America, like nobody who watches CNN will watch Fox, and nobody who watches Fox would ever dream to watch CNN or something like that. Those two stations have opposing views. And if you're in one, you're only getting one type of view. And if you're in the other, you're only getting one type of view. It means you have a very one-sided view and perspective on the world. And that leaves you kind of short-sighted. You've got to try to fill in those blanks in that kind of stuff. And that is called the echo chamber. And it's really important to be fully aware of it. Now, the fourth one is what I call the 3-step formula for managing an information vacuum. It's very important that, first of all, you recognize when you're in an information vacuum. And the way to do that is just ask yourself the question, are you waiting on a decision? Are you waiting on an answer? Are you waiting on a call? And anytime you're waiting on something that somebody else has to provide you with, that is often a situation where you're in an information vacuum. And when you're in an information vacuum, you've got to start to look at what is happening here. What am I doing with the lack of information? And that is where you start to say, am I filling in the blanks with assumptions? And you may be doing exactly that. And it may be hard for you to recognize that you're actually filling in the missing blanks with assumptions. So awareness is the key. Try to spot it nice and early. And when you spot it, take control. Now, the second thing to do is seek reliable sources of information. Instead of making assumptions, ask the simple questions. Who actually knows the answer? Who could give me the answer? Second of all, you could ask yourself, is there historical context or is there historical data that would actually give me clarity here? A lot of the time, if you look back over history, you can see what is going to happen. And then just simply ask yourself the question, are you listening to facts or are you just speculating? And a good example of this would be just newspaper headlines. If you're, following the stock market or the property market or something, and you pick up the newspaper and it says market crash greatest in history or something like that is a really dramatic, fear-creating headline. But you've also got to remember that headlines are what sell newspapers. And there's that old saying, if it bleeds, it leads. That is what newspapers are in the business of. They're in the business of getting you to see this like scary headline and pick up the paper and buy it. So just recognize when you're getting that kind of scary headline versus actual data. And then 3, what you've got to do here is you've got to take action. And if you either you take action or you simply let it go. You can't have both. So if you can get the missing information, and as you saw in my story relating to my mom, I called up a person who could go and get that information. They jumped in the car, they went to the hospital, and they got the information that was required. But if you cannot get the information, you must accept the uncertainty of the situation and just focus on what you can control. And what you can control are your emotions and your responses. Like, try not to overreact to a situation. Of course, when it comes to your mother's health and stuff like that, it's not easy to sort of sit back and do nothing, but it's also very easy to overreact in that situation. So instead of stressing out, let's say using the example of the business meeting that you're waiting on or the important call you're waiting on, if instead of sitting there stressing out over what's the delay, just simply send a follow-up email and then move on to the next task. Just move on to another task and take your mind off it. Now, why do resilient investors and entrepreneurs, why do they never operate in a information vacuum? And it's down to just good business. And I guess business instincts are one of the reasons why people would do this. The best business owners and investors, they always seek actual data before they make a decision. They never make decisions based on assumptions because they know how that can easily be wrong. So if you want to, what you have to do is you have to remove emotion from the process. And that is where, the best investors in the world, they typically take advantage of something like a market crash. And it's not that they're doing anything wrong. It's simply that they're able to control their emotions better than the average person. There's a great old saying from Warren Buffett. When people are greedy, be fearful. And when people are fearful, be greedy. And what he means is when there's a crash, when everyone's panicking and selling, that's the time you should be buying in. And when you see everyone else out there making loads of money, that's the time that you have to be thinking, I'm not so sure. Maybe it's time to kind of step back out of the market. The more informed you are, the less emotional and reactive you will be. And my final takeaway is going back to the story about my mom and the scare down in Spain with her health. Lack of information triggered stress and immediately went to worst case scenario thinking. And that led to some overreaction on behalf of my brother. In the case, once we had the actual information to hand, it was easy to see that actually the situation wasn't that bad. In fact, it was pretty ordinary. And so when you don't have a situation that is really, really bad like that, you suddenly go, you're calm, everyone's calm, you can relax a little bit. And what this experience has taught me is how to recognize when you're in an information vacuum and how to deal with it in a way that in the future, rather than immediately jumping to a scenario that is worst case, that you should just simply look for some way of getting the clarity that you need, whether it's reaching out, whether it's finding somebody that can actually go and get you the information. But you need actual data rather than your assumptions. So guys, I hope you found this episode to be worth the wait. Sorry that I missed last week. As I mentioned, this talk that I've just given is part one of a series called The Unshakable Investor. And you will find a link below in the show notes to my YouTube channel. It's the Gavin J. Gallagher YouTube channel. And so until next week, I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Facade. If you enjoyed the show or found it useful in any way, could I please ask you to take a moment to leave a review over on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. There is no algorithm for the podcast, and so the only way we can get other people to find out about it is when it's shared by you. So if you can do that, it'd be great. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover on future episodes, please connect with me via the school community or just send me a message on Instagram or wherever. You'll see the links in the show notes below. You can stay up to date with all of my content and the projects that I'm working on by signing up for my weekly newsletter, and you'll find a link below in the show notes for that too. That's all for now, guys. I'll see you back here same time next week.